Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Burwell. I am your host of VIE Speaks Conversations with Heart and Soul. This platform was created a couple of years ago so that we could have a new media platform to tell stories face to face and get much more in depth. And so today, my first guest for season 2 of VIE Speaks, is the one and only Daryl Davis, entrepreneur, town planner, developer, style icon, soon to be author, and so many more things. Daryl Davis, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lisa.
I'm so glad you're here.
I am too.
We have known each other 30 years.
Yes.
So we have some great history. And I feel so honored that you're on this podcast because 30 years ago, when I moved from New England to come work for you in your town as the first marketing director for the Merchants Association, I would, one, never have believed that it was going to be such a good move for me. And two, that I would actually still be here. I thought I would go back to corporate America and, just this was going to be a little stint in my life. But obviously, it was a moment in time that changed the trajectory of my life and where it was going. And in any interview that I was on a podcast last week with Sowell House, and, I always give that moment in time and that decision and that opportunity that you gave to me so fondly and reverently, because it was such a good moment in time for me to go into the direction that I did. So thank you for that. One-on-one. I've said it to other people, but I don't think I've ever said it to you face to face.
Thank you for all the support that you've given me and Seaside over the years. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're so welcome. And I love you and everything that you've done, and a big fan, as so many other people are. So let's tell our listeners just a little bit about, take us back 40 years ago when you and your husband, Robert, who co-developed this town of Seaside 40 years ago. Tell me what that felt like at the beginning when you were wargaming this idea out and then you were starting to walk out your vision in the very early days when you were driving around the United States and even Europe to just look at towns and study them and feel them. What was that like? Was it exciting? Was it nerve-wracking?
Extremely exciting and open. It was embarking on a project which I didn't know would involve a lifetime, that any idea was worth considering. It was almost like being a child again. It was very playful and very unserious and very open. And we had so much fun sharing ideas and throwing out, well, maybe this will happen, maybe that'll happen. And every new building we saw in these small towns we fell in love with and saw a piece of it coming back to Seaside in some way.
Would you take pictures? Would you write notes? How did you catalog all this intel that you were gaining on your road trips?
Well, I did it by observing. And I thank my husband, Robert, for teaching me how to see. I used to see him drawing, looking at a building and drawing aspects of it. And I would say, well, what are you drawing? Why don't you just take a picture of it? And he said, well, when you draw it, you see it better. All the details come out. So I started, even though I wasn't drawing, I started looking more deeply at what he was looking at and what things were made of and how they went together. How did two pieces of wood go together? And what did the corners look like? And what were the hinges? There were so many components to what I was looking at, and in a way, I guess, cataloging in my brain.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating. So for history here and background, Robert is an architect and
real estate developer.
Okay, real estate developer. Pardon.
But he's a student of architecture.
A student,
and
very
history.
much
History major.
So how did you sort of get the band together at the beginning when Robert had this idea to build this town on 80 acres that he inherited from his grandfather? How was it organic? How you met Andreas Duani and other people architects that were like-minded, that had the vision for the town planning?
Well, we met Andreas and Liz through the architecture editor of House Beautiful magazine, Susan Grant Lewin. And she was down in Miami shooting a house, a condo that Robert had designed. And she was saying, I met these great young architects who just graduated school. Let me introduce you. And Andreas and Liz at the time were working in a firm with 2 other graduates of their schools. And we just gravitated towards each other. And at somewhere during the first part of the year, Andreas and Liz split with their partners because one was going in more of a condo direction, and Liz and Andreas were exploring how to build towns and urban history and fabric of communities.
At the beginning, was it met with resistance that you were doing just something very unheard of and that people didn't understand what you were doing, or were people impressed at the undertaking that you were heading on?
People didn't understand it, and I'm sure they thought that Robert was crazy. And, no bankers understood it. It was just kind of out of the realm of the local building milieu vocabulary, because building a town often meant it wasn't really a town. It was like doing some houses, and then some other developer would come in and do a strip shopping center, and then another developer would come in and do another strip shopping center to join the 2 towns together.
Mm-hmm. Part of your backstory, why I am so excited that we're talking to you today, is that Seaside is highly decorated, has been written about more than any other town in the United States and beyond that I know of. And you are an integral, centric part of this town building. And your story, I think, a piece that is your story that is so pivotal to its success and its style, quite frankly, has not been shouted from the rooftops. And that is what I'm so excited about in this interview, coupled with your debut books, The Seaside Style, that is telling your story too, that we're working on together, and in final editing stages where you are adding and subtracting some parts of the story. How does it feel at this moment in time, 40 years later, after you've walked out this incredible journey, now that you are actually telling the story? Because you've been a storyteller your entire life. You told the story with your style and educated an entire group of people, one who bought into the town, the tourists that came here. You taught them how to understand the brand by everything that you did, the clothing, the merchant tenant mix that you put together, the colors that you brought forth. You understood how to storytell through style and basically made a brand. That is such a huge part of the story. And so much was involved in making that happen. Did you know that you always had a unique sense of style and you understood your style?
No, I never thought about that. I never felt creative until I met Robert, and I started developing my side of creativity. I think I got into all the business aspects of Seaside, like interior design and setting the table and setting the porch and filling in the shops and what type of merchants still be there, because nobody else wanted to do it. The architects were off doing their things. They were making the big picture, the important stuff.
Right.
Nobody was thinking about, well, where are people going to sit? Right. What does it feel like? What does it smell like? So there was this little area that I could work on that nobody was interested in. And I could struggle and invent a vocabulary that would complement what the important things that they were doing.
Well, that's fascinating. I remember, so when I first moved to town, that was 30 years ago. And obviously it was very different from being in New England and corporate America. So, fish out of water for sure for a couple of years on my end. But I do remember like watching you walk across the street in beautiful white linen and some really groovy scarf that you had put over your head and some big chunky necklaces or bracelet. And I just watched you sort of like glide across the road, ethereal, like, who is that person and what does she have on? And that was what Perspicacity was back then.
Right.
Your store that you had open for 30 years?
4 years.
Okay. 34. So that to me you were just the epitome of someone that was walking around the town that was basically evoking the style and what it felt like there and what it was going to be. And then your own sense of fashion, and then the story that's been told a fair amount of times but hasn't been elaborated upon is how were you going to help the vision come to life? And that is, you instinctively came up with the idea like, well, people were driving through the town. There wasn't a stop sign. No one really knew what was going on. So you decided to set up the vegetable stand and just had like an effortless packaging of the flowers and everything. So did that just pop into your head, like that I'm going to try this?
Well, yes. But I was using models that I saw on our trips through Italy and France, looking at beautiful shops like Fonchon in Paris, which is a food emporium where everything is set up to perfection, to the more casual nature of Italian hill towns and their markets.
Okay. So you just knew that, and it did work. So tell me, like, how did you know that you were onto something? Did people stop? Like, tell me the stories about what people would say.
Well, I didn't know I was onto something because there weren't people to stop. Maybe during the day, one car would drive by because most people went down Highway 98. They didn't go on the beach road. And so it took a while. Someone would stop, and I guess they thought it was outlandish, which it was, sitting out there in the middle of 80 acres with boxes of strawberries. And they stopped, and they told someone else, and they'd come back with someone else, and it was just word of mouth. But it wasn't a money-making venture.
Right.
We would take the vegetables home, and we had two houses. One was the office, and one was the model house, and we lived in the model house. So on Sunday, when the model was open, and if anyone came by, they would smell me cooking up the leftovers from the market, the jams and the banana bread and tomato sauce, trying to rescue the outlay of money that I had put into the market that nobody came to.
Right. Wow. So were you nervous then? Were you thinking, I wonder like how long I'm going to do this before I'm going to get nervous if it's going to work or not?
I wasn't nervous because there wasn't anybody criticizing me. There wasn't anybody. I was just experimenting. I was being very free. And very childlike. And I like to create vignettes. So I look at things as a design composition. And if there's 3 elements in the design, and one element moves, it changes the balance of the design. So I'm always trying to refigure the design and create it so it feels good, it looks good.
Wow.
And my eye constantly does this without even knowing it does it. So I have that ability. So for me, I was always recreating that combination of things to get that magical look in my mind I was going for.
Wow. Well, it's just a fascinating story on so many levels. One, because it was a true, authentic journey, and at the same time, because it proved to be so successful over time. Um, there really isn't another word. Me being in marketing and branding and publishing, my whole career, and getting ready for this interview too, I thought, really, when you look at the totality of the situation, it's like genius marketing. Really genius, because that's what it took to communicate and tell the story throughout all these different, the architecture, obviously the town planning, but Modica Market and what that anchored for the town, and then Sundog Books, who had a really small shop. And then you would work with Sundog Books and nurture how were they going to grow. And so you are an entrepreneur in and of your own right with your retail empire, Seaside Associated Stores. And then you also, though, had the sensibility and understanding that you couldn't just win in your stores, because all of your retail had to win in the town for the town to win. So that's like you were on a dual track for making everybody a winner. And that isn't hard to do as the landlord. But then I watched you do it with a great deal of finesse and nurturing. Maybe some things, when you had to say certain things, might not have been well received, because some things are hard to say. But I always thought you had such true intentions to see them succeed. And then when you see, when I see Sundog Books now in their beautiful building on the circle of Seaside, and I remember what it was in the small, like 1,000 or less square feet. What do you think of when you see that, for an example of like the beginning to what it is now?
Well, from a business point of view, mom and pops and that type of retail where people start really small with a gem of an idea or a germ of an idea, and then they build on it. And when they get to a certain stability, then they move on to a bigger store and a bigger space, and they get more adept at their business. At the beginning, it was hard to have a business because the season was only, when I started Perspicacity, it was June, Labor Day, Memorial Day to Labor Day, and that was it. So every year you had to gather a whole new cast of people for 3 months. It was an impossible way to run a business and teach people about customer service and connect with your customers. You might only see them once every 9 months.
Right. So to say you had to wear all hats would be an understatement, because obviously you did on all levels. What, of all the hat wearing that you've done over the last 40 years, what was one of the best things that you were able to do, and what was the worst, the hardest?
I think I had the most fun mentoring other women in business and teaching them how to develop aspects of themselves and to how to see what I was looking at so they could do and portray the store or the environment they were in the same way to tell the story of Seaside. Like all roads should lead to Rome.
Right. Right. Well, then that's a good segue right now to talk about your fascinating team that you have nurtured over the years at your own conglomeration of super successful retail empire that you have right now, with Erica at the helm for many years with you.
Yes, 34 years.
34 years. And that is just, in and of itself, an anomaly to be able to have that kind of retention and still like each other and respect each other and grow, and grow. And then her daughter, Mackenzie, is part of the team now. And I know you're doing some mentoring, with her. Right. So it's a legacy and generations. And then your own son, Micah, is a similar age, if not the same age as Mackenzie. And he grew up in the town too. So, right?
Yes.
Yeah, similar age. So, and now Micah, what does it feel like now that Micah is of age and has an interest to join the team of you and Robert with the town making and continuing to grow that right now. How does that feel that you see this legacy realized?
Well, I find it fascinating because he was never interested in going in the business because he wanted to do something. He wanted to carve his own path and not do something his parents did or be compared to his father, which I think is a tale about father-son growth and development that we've heard throughout the years. But he knew he was going to inherit whatever we inherited from Seaside. And so we convinced him to come and experience it while we were still alive, and he could ask us questions. And that must have made sense to him, but he moved here 2.5 years ago, and he's been taking over the responsibility of it.
It's exciting to see it, just because in my own memory, I see him as a small little kid playing in the amphitheater in Seaside, and now to see a grown man that has realized, this legacy, and he's taking it, and you and Robert are both alive to work together and see it. I think it's a huge blessing and just something so great to see.
I said to Robert last night while we were having dinner, I said, I think Mike is going to do a really great job at Seaside because he won't be as obsessive as we were. He won't get lost in the minutia of all the details that we did. And so he'll be able to make clearer decisions with his own vision.
Mm-hmm. Well, because it's totally next level. You were pioneering to the nth degree. And, having to travail through some really hard, terrain and rock, and pioneering is very, very different than the next level after something is developed with a very strong foundation. So what you created is a very strong foundation for him to take over and inherit, not minimizing all that has, because every next level has their own set of challenges. Right. So it's not like it's a cakewalk, to run a town, even that's been, built over 40 years either. On the heels of what you just said, so I'm segueing to this one quick question that doesn't really fit in anywhere necessarily in chronology of our interview, but tell me, because it's just always so fascinating to me to know about what it felt like to you when Hollywood came to town and set up shop for, I think, a year with David Ware? Peter Ware, the movie director. And Hollywood converged on the town with Jim Carrey as the lead in the movie. And you and Robert actually were in the movie. So what was the whole experience like? And what part of the journey was that on? Because when I did interview Robert, he did say that was a moment in time that was very important for Seaside, because at that time, whatever was going on financially, it was like a boom.
It was like Hurricane Opal.
Okay, Hurricane Opal.
So it was several months after Hurricane Opal, I believe.
Okay.
And Wendy and Peter Weir came to town, the director, and Wendy Weir was, I believe, the costume designer. And she had seen Seaside in a magazine, and they were scouting locations. And they fell in love with Seaside. And we negotiated a deal with them bringing hundreds of people in, and we having an active community that has to work around the filming of the movie with all the cords, everything, for moments frozen in time because the director has to reshoot something. So people can't walk on the sidewalk. They can't come out of the shops. They have to go back and finish their iced tea at the restaurant. Right. It was a really amazing experience, and we had Paramount was a great company. They were very sensitive. Maybe that has to do with the director. I think they're in charge of the whole shebang. But they were very sensitive of it being a resort town.
Right.
And it was I was a little jealous because they had all this money to come in and get things done. If they wanted a sign painted, they got it done in an hour.
Right.
They didn't have to wait for 3 weeks.
Correct.
If they wanted to change a color on a building, it was done by the next mealtime. And we had struggled with getting things done for years.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, wow.
Right. I thought the same thing when they in Ruskin Place, where they would just like reface an entire building in, I don't know, 2 weeks or less. And I remember saying to myself, maybe Hollywood should make towns.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I did say that to my husband, who's an architect, he said, but it's temporary. What they're creating that looks like it's pressed in an instant does look like great, but it will, wither and die in 3 months because it's not built to stand the test of time.
Well, Gerald is right about that, because what we left that the movie had created, sets like curbs on the sidewalk and false buildings, fell apart within a year.
Yeah. So that's how they could do it, but
yes.
not really. So you don't have to be that jealous
it's
about it. It's an illusion. Hollywood is all an illusion. So many things are somewhat of an illusion. So, and then you were in the movie. Did you find that fun?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
They came and picked me up with a limousine
at
my house,
which
was 2 minutes away from where they were shooting.
Okay.
I had the royal treatment.
That's so great. What a great story that is. I mean, how many people get to experience that, and so many other things that you've experienced as well. So what would have been, like, in all those years, like a low light, like maybe one of the darkest hours where you're like, shoot, this is way harder than I thought?
It's the middle stuff.
Yeah, that's very, very hard.
Which, when you start putting to test all the things you've been working on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And people, it's just that the bigger you get, and the more people that you are responsible for, or that you touch, or that you're interfacing with, things become much more intricate and involved and difficult when, you're dealing with people. I mean, that's why so many people, don't like dealing with people, but there is an art form to it, for sure, about how to reach a goal, keep good relationships, or at least open relationships to grow it. But that, I would say, is the absolute hardest. And managing and finding your managing personality that works best for you, that works best for the people that are with you too, because all managers are not created equal, as you know.
Right.
I think you and I have similar ethos about that, and that's like building people up, growing them, letting them be their authentic selves and creative, while just maintaining, like, the vision. I don't think you can do anything very, very creative and not be that type of person, because I think you'd squelch so much creativity from your own people that it would be counterintuitive. That's a byproduct of it. That's not the reason I do it, but it's just my style. I think it's similar to yours, and wanting to see that in other people, because if I didn't, and I think you and I have talked about this before, I think it'd be very meaningless. It's too hard to do something without seeing the fruits of your labor in actual people, rather than just finances.
It's not, for me, it's not financial. It's teaching people how to be successful and enjoy what they're doing, and learn about the business aspects and all the details that are involved with it. So when they go out and they do something else, that they will be successful.
So regarding success stories, did you ever think that your retail empire was going to be as successful as it has been?
I really did not think, when I was selling tomatoes and floral embroidered dresses, that I would be here talking to you.
Right.
I did not think that at all.
So I think you should, there should be a course at Harvard on how you basically created your whole retail empire. I think your next stop.
Well, I think that just starting small and just developing an idea, and then that idea, it's like how I imagine you might compose a song. You hear a melody in your head, and you start to give design and presence to that melody by the notes you pick, and you then try and give it some heft. You just keep building on it so it measures up to the image you have in your mind, even though that image is changing quite a lot as you're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so beautiful. That's very poetically said. And you can tell that this branding isn't branding speak or marketing speak either, because it's really coming from your heart and soul. And basically what I think that what you just said is tantamount to basically you're just doing a dance. You're just doing a dance through life, and this is your life. And that's why it seems so effortless and graceful.
I don't think of Seaside as a brand. I don't think of it because when I think of a brand, I think of Tide, I think of Kleenex, I think of an object that is concrete and one-dimensional. With Seaside, I think I see it more having feelings and dimension and different layers. And so I don't see it equal to a bottle of Tide. I see it more with emotional aspects attached to it.
It is a story. And I also think it has so many different layers to it. But I do think it's also a love story because you and Robert did this together. And that's a story, or I've never really heard that said very often either, because, and love stories have their ups and downs and their in-betweens and all that. I mean, that is true about them. They just, they're not completely, static and everything's always perfect or everything's, bad. It's really, really static. But when you're working and co-laboring together, that is, and then you didn't leave and he didn't leave and you saw it through. I mean, that's definitely a love story, because maybe you wouldn't still be doing this if it was just somebody else and not your husband's desire to do this as well.
We obviously had that connection together that could create the magic of merging ideas and having arguments and disagreements, but yet having something come out of those discussions and bad feelings and all the other things that happen along the way of doing something like this that just morphed into something that was worthwhile. And if it wasn't, we just changed it.
Right.
We had the ability to cut our losses quickly. And we had a lot of losses, but they were nothing that was devastating because they were not a huge undertaking to begin with. It was just lots of little steps.
So I think the Seaside School was birthed shortly after the Truman Show, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so you had some monies from that you were able to basically endow into the school.
Right, we built the school.
And that was just such an unbelievable thing for our community and for the town. And was the school always part of the master plan?
Yes, it was always part. There was, from the very beginning, we knew we would have a school. We knew we would have an interfaith building. We knew we would have several nonprofits. We didn't know what they were going to be.
So, and all of that is just amazing. And what's the Seaside School has become and how it has just changed so many people's lives and offering such a different and more progressive and I think better education than most could hope for. And what an unbelievable endeavor that is for all the people that live in the community in Seaside, but then also people outside of the community get to partake as well, which is so key.
It's a lottery system.
Right, and the community building. And so you've got that going on, building a school, and then you started the rep.
That's
the
correct.
Seaside Rep for the theater aspect and the thespian aspect of it and the arts.
That developed out of, I started doing events at Seaside because we wanted to, the tomatoes were only working so-so. We wanted to bring people for cultural reasons because we really wanted this to develop into the cultural capital of Northwest Florida.
Which you succeeded.
Well, we didn't start small with our ambitions. So what we did is I'm a firm believer that someone always comes along that helps you. And so we met someone who was with Theater Group at Fort Walton Beach, and they started bringing small plays to Seaside that we would have in the various Seaside pavilions. And then when homeowners had, for instance, connections, we had one homeowner that had connections to the traveling part of the Metropolitan Opera. And when they had visiting artists in Pensacola, we got them to come over here for a night. So we were doing events like this to balance out the building of homes, so it wasn't just so flat and one-dimensional.
Right. Creating community and culture, as you said. And then the Seaside Institute, of which you and Robert and Mike are both championing right now too, and taking that into a new phase, which I find very, very exciting. I think there's a lot going on right now. Do you feel like it's kind of had like a somewhat of a resurgence?
Yes, yeah. I do. I think that we've changed over the years. It's evolved. Things that last evolve. And I think it's getting to be a stage now where we're really focused on community development, whether it's Walton County or other coastal cities. And we're creating an alliance with the Water Institute in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And so we have many exciting developments happening that will soon to be talked about.
And the Seaside Prize is in February, and that's a big deal. And the recipient is
Donald Shoup. He created a book and a way of thinking about parking.
I went last year, and I thought it was absolutely amazing and something that I wish everybody could go to. So really, if you are listening and you want to go to the Seaside Prize weekend, you can get tickets, and I would highly recommend it, because if you want your brain and to work and you want to think about different things, if you want to really educate and empower yourself to think differently, to basically do things differently and change the world, that is a great forum for great minds and great thinking. And it's so refreshing that it's not, this vapid form of entertainment, or I don't know, it's just like such a heady, interesting weekend. And when I left last year, I felt like my brain really liked it. It was a good workout for my brain. And I absolutely love all that you were doing with that as well. What might be some key pieces of insight or wisdom that you could give to somebody that was going to create something for themselves that was like a walk that they're walking in, that you've learned over the years on how to stay the course, how to realize a vision, how to keep going? Because you have to have a resolve to not quit. I mean, that's really you can't quit. If you did, you wouldn't be here right now. So how does someone stay the course?
Well, I had lots of mini quitting, but the mini quitting was in my mind, where my mind would need to turn off to feel a balance again and an excitement for what I was doing. I guess you call that a checking out. So even though my body was there and going through the motions, I knew I was checked out as a preservation method.
Oh, that's good.
But I think believing in what you're doing, and actually, I saw Seaside. After visiting so many beach towns in Saint-Tropez and Portofino and along the Italian and French Riviera, I saw Seaside, and I knew that we could do that. I wasn't worried about how we would do it. I just knew we could do it.
That's
so
amazing.
From 1979, I knew what this was going to look like.
Great. That's amazing.
And I still do. And the hard part for me is trying to convey that vision to other people I work with, so they see the same thing I'm seeing. But yet they add their own.
Because that's evolution, like you
Yes.
said, like everything does evolve and doesn't stay static. But the core has to be strong to weather like the changes and the new nuances, the new ones that are coming in. And I think that's what you have there, like such a strong foundation. And I think so many people do not understand foundation building. They just do not understand it. And by that, I mean, I wish that things had happened so much faster for me. Like really, I'm like really like things to happen fast. And they didn't. And it was a one by one, step by step process, like, you're talking about. And
well, how long did you think when you had this idea for having a business, what did you expect yourself to have it completed by?
I thought after 10 years or maybe 15 years that I would have reached a certain level that I don't even know what it is, but a level that was higher than I had reached. And, but what I learned about that about 10 years ago, when I still wasn't happy exactly where I was at, was that the foundation was so deep because, we had survived Opal, COVID, the oil spill, the absolute horrible recession in 2008. And I had this epiphany, I'm still standing. And that was a lot of things to weather. And then I realized, I understand now. Foundations take time. And the deeper you go, the stronger a foundation can be. And then when things wouldn't go well, or I would get nervous about like the new problem that was happening in the world or that you had to contend with, I would rest in it going, yeah, it's okay, because I know that foundation is so deep because I walked it and it's been many years. And so that gave me great comfort that I could weather things, that the business could weather things. And so when you're saying that things are changing and all, I mean, obviously the foundations and the roots are so deep, literally and figuratively in Seaside, that it can weather so much. And that is what you said, you keep walking it out and it's 40 years later. But that's what most people won't do. I find that people don't want to do something for 30 or 40 years. I don't think they do. And that's why I'm amazed that, I can still do it, that you're still doing it. And then you think that some people want what you have. I'm like, well, you can too, but it might take 30 years. And do you want to wait that long? And I don't think most people do want to wait that long. I'll even admit I didn't want to wait that long, but so be it. That's how it is. And that's how it was. And, but it's lessons along the way, like a journey. It couldn't be any other way. I wished it was, but that doesn't mean it should have been, but it's just,
when things went wrong in Seaside, and I would talk to Robert about it, wrong meaning a house looked more awkward than I would have liked it to look, or not placed correctly or built well. He would say, just wait till the trees grow up and it fills in. And he was very right about that, because a lot of times what's noticeable to me is not noticeable to other people, because they're looking at the whole picture of how it feels to them and is it pleasing to the eye. They're not looking at all the details.
Right. And the patina, because I do remember in meetings that Robert would always say, Seaside is going to look so much better when it's older.
Right.
And everything, the patina and the growth of the trees are going to make it look different. And it does. And it does for sure. So let's just kind of talk a little bit about the book. Your book, The Seaside Style, is a coffee table book that's 235 pages, thereabouts. And you're in some edits right now and some rewrites. Are you getting excited for it to go on press?
I am.
Good.
I am. I think it's just a beautiful book. The photos are terrific.
They are
and
beautiful.
I think people will really enjoy reading the stories.
I do too. And seeing it as well. So we're so excited to be co-laboring with you on this book as well. And we have our heart and soul into, your heart and soul in this book too, and cannot wait until we see it, and also that it's going to fly off the shelves in all of your retail outlets as well.
I hope so.
Oh, it will. It will. It definitely will. Well, Daryl, I thank you so much for being our guest. We look forward to seeing all that you are going to continue doing, and especially as you walk out this next chapter, telling your own story in that book and having book signings and walking into a different layer of your own storytelling. It's going to really open up this side of your own story and your own voice. And I am so happy for you and excited to see this come to fruition as well. And I thank you for your mentorship, for your friendship, and for your inspiration.
I thank you for your friendship and your support.
All right, everyone. Well, I hope you enjoyed VIE Speaks Conversations with Heart and Soul. Daryl Davis, the icon, the entrepreneur, the developer, the land planner, the town planner, and the person in the town with heart and soul. We thank you for this interview. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.